Hello, fellow CIQers. Sarah Nell Wilson here. I shared a post this past weekend about how my sister, who's a fifth grade teacher, invited me in to do some improvisation specifically related to managing stress. So I wanted to follow up with a quick little video to talk through the exercise that I was referencing about the difference between yes butting versus yes anding. And this is one of my favorite exercises. I've done this in a number of situations with groups from little kids on up to executives. I think at this point, I don't know, I've lost track. It's been thousands of people have learned this from me. And yes and really comes from the world of improvisation, and that's part of my background. And it's one of the critical components of stepping on stage, not knowing what you're going to say or what the other person's going to say, and essentially co-creating. I think improvisation is one of the most beautiful examples of what it means to truly co-create together. And so if you haven't had the opportunity to try some improv, I highly recommend it. So the exercise goes like this. The way that I set it up is what we're trying to do is the objective is to help people understand how can they be aware of their default to perhaps tear down other people's ideas, and to find strategies of how they can build upon the ideas that the other team members present. So it's really simple. It takes about, I don't know, total of maybe 5-10 minutes in order for us to facilitate it. So the way I start it up is I put two people in pairs, and I make up some story about how we've been asked to design, come up with some amazing trip, so if we're at a company, the setup is we've just, had a killer year, and leadership has said we can take the company on whatever trip we want. Money's no object. And your objective with your partner is to plan the ultimate vacation in about a minute and a half. And the way that this round works is that one person will make an offer, and then every sentence after that sentence will start with the words yes, but, and you'll alternate. So for example, I think we should go to Walt Disney World. And the other person would say, yeah, but they just had the hurricane. And then I would say, yeah, but, and then we would go back and forth. And people kind of have a sense of what to expect, but they don't realize how frustrating it is until you just put people in you're basically forcing them to butt heads and to experience the whole addicted to being right. My idea is the right idea. So have them do this just for a minute and notice the body language. So pay attention at that meta level, get on the balcony, because what you'll find is people will start spinning their wheels. They'll start getting frustrated. The body language, they'll start to move away from each other. And then when it's done, just simply ask them, well, what was that like? What was that experience like? And for most people, it'll be frustrating, and they'll be, it wasn't fun. Or a debrief question I might use is, well, what would be a word that would describe what this experience was like for you? And then I might ask, how successful did you feel you were in planning the vacation? How successful were you at collaborating? And of course, they're going to come up with lots of examples of how they weren't, how they were just tearing each other down. And so then I go, okay, so now I'm going to teach you a little bit different, just a change to this exercise. So you're going to get a chance to do it again. And this time we're only going to change one simple word. And that is, instead of every sentence after the initial offer starting with yes, but, it will start with yes, and. So you let them go for a minute. You'll notice that they move into each other, that the amount of ideas they come up with is far greater. The details they're able to create is pretty amazing. They'll get excited. You'll notice the volume, pay attention to the volume in the room. Typically the volume in the room will raise. And then you just ask them, so what was that experience like? What would be a word you would use to describe that experience? And then I always make sure, who has a killer vacation? They're really excited. And inevitably you'll pull from a couple of different groups, and they'll share we're going to go this, we're going to do this. And both parties are really excited, and they're excited to share. And that's something you can draw on as far as showing the connection of what it feels like to be to feel connected with somebody, to be co-creating with somebody. And it really beautifully mirrors what we're trying to accomplish from a CIQ perspective. So then once they've had both experiences, then you can dig into how many of you have experienced or seen yeah butters? How many of you, raise your hand, have been yeah butters? And you can talk about how just as simple as changing one word, right? Our words create our reality, can expand and open our mind and open us up to building on ideas and exploring and expanding. versus just tearing down or making sure that it was my idea is the right idea. The other thing that I like to say is a couple of sometimes people will say, right, but what do you do if you just don't agree with the idea? And one of the points that I like to make whenever I'm teaching this to a group is, yes, anding is really beautiful when we're in brainstorming mode, when we're in idea generating mode. There does come a point where reality sets in and we have to filter our ideas. There's a time when budget becomes something we have to think about. But yes, anding is in that really beautiful time when you're working on an idea and you're just like letting it rip. Like, let's just explore tons of possibilities. And so what I always tell people is that saying yes and isn't necessarily saying yes to implementing their idea, but it's saying yes that their idea could be explored and that we're going to explore it together. And then I like to challenge a group to think about, like, how would you yes and if you disagreed? And if you think about it from a place of like, how do we be curious with each other? An example I shared is I had a leader once who we were rolling out a huge initiative, and they were very concerned about the amount of time it would take people off the floor, which is something we had given a lot of consideration to. And in the meeting, the way the question came across was, didn't you think about how much time this was going to take? Right? Which wasn't even a question, it was a statement. But a yes and might be, yeah, and I hear what you're doing, and one of the things I'm curious about is, what consideration did you take to explore it? So you're opening it up and asking that question you don't know the answers to. And then finally, one of the stories I want to leave you with is, yes and can be an incredibly, it's simple but so effective. Like I said, I've facilitated this. Dozens, hundreds of workshops, and I will never forget that I used it as just like a warm-up for a strategic planning session with some executives. And I had an executive come up to me the next morning, and he said, you know what, Sarah? He's like, I've been thinking about that yes and exercise, and I realized I yes but my wife and my kids all the time, and I want to change that. So I hope that this is helpful for you. I hope that I've given you enough information. If there's anything else I can help with, I'm happy to talk through in more detail about how I set this up or how you might be able to set this up. And then I will be sharing my one-pager here shortly. So let's keep up the fight, CIQers. It's an honor to be a part of this club. And yeah, this is my gift. All right, bye.